And we'll start the recording. So it feels, Jennifer, I mean, and I give Facebook a minute or two to just let everybody know. So I kind of just like chatter for a minute. It seems like forever since we've done one. It has.
It does. Yeah. It feels like it's been a hot minute.
I did a hot minute. I think it was because, okay, so I had eye surgery done. And so I had my cataract surgery done in the last 4 weeks. I had both my eyes done. So that's why I have no makeup on and I look like I was asleep.
No, I think you look fabulous.
But I purposely didn't schedule anything. Although I had the event with Geraldine Brooks the day after my first surgery, and I had to do this, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but it was Geraldine Brooks and Michael Lewis of all people.
Oh,
just a small little event, but I was like,
yeah, nothing big.
We got this.
Did you see them?
I could. It was great, but I was just like, but I was still a little, because it was literally the day. It was like less than 24 hours after my surgery, so I think I was still a little like.
Wow. You're meant to be in bed, aren't you, for about a week after? Well, this is what my children's childminder keeps telling me. She's just had hers done. She said she has to be in bed for 2 weeks.
No, it was.
Wow.
I don't think she needed to probably do that, but maybe she just wanted to.
I could take 2 weeks off my children.
It's just something.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to quickly, Eve, I want to welcome you to Warwick's virtually, and congratulations on the release of your book in the United States yesterday, Birdcage.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
Yay.
Yeah.
Rosie, welcome back. Love having you last time with, we were talking Laura Day, though that was so much fun. So the love of my life. We're going to talk about that too. So just real quick for people who are joining us on Facebook right now, there's that lovely book. If you're on Facebook, in the comment section, I'm going to link to both Eve and Rosie's books, so you can easily click on those. If you're in the San Diego area, we would love for you to come to the store. There's parking behind the store, lots of other great stuff to look at. And also in that comment section, if you want, you can put your comments or questions to Eve or to Rosie, and I'll feed those into Jennifer. They're going to chat for about 35 minutes, maybe a little bit longer since there's two authors. Jennifer, we try not to go to a whole hour if we can, because people kind of but we'll just let you guys flow and have a great chat. If you're watching us on YouTube later, there's no live going on, but it's a great conversation. So stay with us if you're on YouTube. So with that, Jennifer, I'll intro you real quick and then get the show on the road here. So awesome. Jennifer, there we go. Jeniffer Thompson is a personal branding expert, digital marketing strategist, and host of the Premise podcast. She's an author and speaker who delivers strategy-rich content and actionable tools that educate and empower authors. She and her husband, Chad, co-founded Monkey See Media in 2004 and have been creating award-winning book cover designs and author websites ever since. Jennifer is a co-founder of San Diego Writers Festival, which is coming up on October 8th in person here in San Diego. Yay. She serves on the board of San Diego Memoirs Writers Association and is currently, I think you might even be finished with her own coming of age memoir. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. See you in a bit.
Thank you so much, Julie. All right, ladies, Rosie, Eve, I'm going to try and hold up our books at the same time. Beautiful covers. I love both of these covers. They're just gorgeous.
Together as well.
Really
They really do. Yeah, I carried them around with me a lot. I have a picture of me pretending like I'm reading both books at the same time.
I have to say, you guys in the States do just such beautiful jackets compared to what we do. I shouldn't say that really, but your jackets are so beautiful. Although Eve, yours is the same in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, this time actually it's the same cover, which is lovely to have.
Oh, is it?
I think it's just it's the same cover in the UK, more or less. So it's nice to have that consistency actually. First time I think it's happened.
I always find it fascinating when, to compare the two books. And Rosie, do you have the UK version with you? Can you show us what it looks like? Of course, it's right there.
Couldn't be more different.
Oh, really? Yeah, seriously, that doesn't speak to me as much as this one does. This one, I like the yellow. But I definitely like this one. I feel this one has more of the feeling of the book, which really sweeps you away on this journey. So, yeah.
I agree.
in the UK, a hardback has to do quite a different job to the job that it has to do in the States. Like that's your big moment with a hardback in the States, whereas in the UK, your big moment is normally when it comes out in paperback. So
interesting.
It's been my experience that my paperbacks have been sort of more emotional than the hardbacks, which have been a bit more sort of grabby and shouty.
Yeah. Do you think that people judge a book by its cover as much in the UK as they do in the United States?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I think it's you can't really escape it, can you? And whether you're in a bookstore or whether it's being, you know, posted on Instagram or something, you've got to have you really want to have a great cover.
It's got to grab you.
Oh, what's that? It's got to grab you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I felt that way about both your books. Well, let me introduce you both. So Eve Chase, the author of Birdcage. Eve Chase is the internationally best-selling author of Black Rabbit Hall, The Wildling Sisters, and The Daughters of Foxcote Manor. She lives in Oxford, England, with her husband and 3 children. And again, this beautiful book, which I can't wait to talk about. And Rosie Walsh, The Love of My Life. Rosie Walsh lived and traveled all over the world, working as a documentary producer and writer. Ghosted, her American debut, was a New York Times bestseller and has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide. The Love of My Life is her second novel. She lives in Devon, England, with her partner and 2 children. Did I pronounce Devon right?
You did.
Yeah.
How did you think you should pronounce it?
Devon, but my husband warned me. He's like, okay, there's a lot of British names. Make sure you pronounce them right. And I was like, oh God. So now I'm nervous about it, I guess.
Well, British place names are impossible. I don't think anyone laughs at foreigners when they get place names wrong, because even I would. They're ridiculous. The spellings are just appalling and unforgivable.
Yes.
Devon's actually pretty easy. You know, the first thing I want to ask both of you is place. So for both of these books, there's a house that's really important to the story and to the characters. And it's almost a character in and of itself. And Eva, I'd like to start with you. Can we talk about the house in the Birdcage and the significance it has to your story, and where did it come from? The idea, I mean.
Well, the idea of the actual house, it doesn't exist in real life, but there are real houses on that stretch of Cornwall, which is the Atlantic coast. So that's the really wild coast of Cornwall, where you get these, you know, huge waves, big weather. And it's still, it's still really remote. I mean, it's the novel's set between 1999 and 2019. And even in 2019, you've got, you know, the helpful thing for a novelist and sort of dodgy Wi-Fi in certain areas, certainly dodgy phone signal. So it's a fantastic sort of crucible in a way that you can take your characters there, plonk them on a cliff top in this sort of wild weather, and they can't easily escape. So that's a big thing. But also it's an area I know really, really quite well, and it's so beautiful, and it's had a long history of attracting artists and writers in that area, from Virginia Woolf to Barbara Hepworth, and so it's so rich. And you know, one of the main characters of my book is an artist, so it made sense on that level, on that narrative level, to situate it there too.
Did the story or the place come first?
They kind of came together, actually. I mean, I knew I really wanted to write about that coast of Cornwall, because in my first book, Black Rabbit Hall, I did the other coast, the south coast, and it's much gentler, much milder, it's much more floral, and you can, you don't sort of take your life in your hands when you go out for from wind to sea swim in the same way. Whereas if you do if you don't really know what you're doing, you can do on the west coast, and so yes, it kind of, I needed it to be there. It couldn't have really been set anywhere else, I don't think.
There's this idea of stormy weather. You know, there's stormy weather inside the house. Yes. And I can't wait to dig into these characters and their individual storms. But I want to talk about the inside the house. So we're 1999 to 2019. So there's a 20-year gap. But we're in a house that hasn't changed since 1999. Yeah. The stuff really matters. And like, I became attached to the stuff. The idea that it might change was like emotional for me. And And of course, the lovely thing is when I started reading Rosie's book, The Love of My Life, she has kind of a similar thing with this house and this stuff that means something to these characters as they're finding their way. So, and we'll get to you in just a minute, Rosie. But Eve, talk about this house and the significance of time and the shift in time and how we had to be in that place. Did you always have the idea that the house would be the same, or did that change in the writing?
Well, I think because it was their grandparents and especially their grandmother's house. And so she was a big collector of bird cages. I mean, and the girls when they were younger were just like, so they're three half sisters, just very quickly for anyone who hasn't read it, and they have different mothers and they share a father. So their father's a sort of, is a sort of an artist, and he's old, getting older now in the 2019. But so, and his daughters are the result of his ex-wife, his ex-mistress, and a life model. So there's a lot of kind of conflict in the house. And when they were girls, it was the only place they would actually get to be together. So it was a really special place. They would go there every summer, and they would meet their sisters because they had other lives. And yeah, and I really enjoyed doing the house because it was kind of, in a way, it was like everyone's granny's house, you know, with the kind of the cooking timer that you had to slap to make it work, and the sort of slightly kind of greasy recipe books and the old pine kitchen. And I couldn't really bear to change it. And I think in a way that I needed the girls to get with the girls, and when they come back as women in their 30s and they've got big jobs and families, so they need to, you know, they need to be able to step into that and be instantly whooshed back in a sort of time machine back to the past. So all their minimal fittings and sleek London apartments all fall away, and they're back in this, you know, very dated pine kitchen surrounded by crockery, but their grandmother's no longer there.
Absolutely lovely. Rosie, so in The Love of My Life, there's a similar house, a childhood home that hasn't changed much as well. So talk to us about the setting, where it's placed, and the house itself.
Funny, I hadn't considered that similarity between our books, and one of the things that I love most about Eve's books are the sort of almost personified houses that are as central to the plot and the characterization as the characters themselves. So the house in my novel is a tiny little terraced house in Hampstead Village in London. Hampstead Village is, I used to live in London, and I had some wonderful times there, the very best of times and the very worst of times. I wouldn't go back there for all the tea in China, however, except if I could live in Hampstead Village. Like, nobody can live in Hampstead Village unless they're a millionaire. However, somehow my two characters, who are very much not millionaires, live in this house that the main character Emma inherited from her grandmother when her grandmother died. I think it's about 15 years before the novel began, and it's a tiny little cramped Georgian terraced house. And Georgian townhouses in the UK are known for having these big, beautiful windows, sort of sliding sash windows. But in a much smaller house, the windows are really small. And Emma and Leo's house is gradually being eaten alive by ivy and other sort of creepers that are growing up it. And Emma's grandmother was a hoarder. A sort of semi-functional hoarder, you know, not sort of mold growing out of the carpet, but you know, she had far too much stuff, and so they are living in this house. But Emma, who's suffered a lot of trauma, is like many people with these sort of hoarding tendencies, like her grandmother. She's lost so many things in her life that she can't really throw anything away. So her poor husband Leo is just living in a house where they can't even get in the dining room because it's just stacked sort of this high with her grandmother's old sheet music. And I had some wonderful times wandering around Hampstead Village, sort of taking pictures of houses, and I made these houses all sort of mate with each other to form this one house that, you know, is a sort of love child of about 3 or 4 different tiny cottages in Hampstead Village. I sort of feel quite sad that it doesn't exist, really, because I'd really like to go there and, you know, have a cup of tea.
It does feel like you can walk around it, but I think that house, it absolutely feels like it exists, and you can walk in and pass the stacks of books and everything else.
Yeah, it would be nice.
You know, you talked about the ivy kind of overtaking. Was that sort of a metaphor for what was happening to the lies in Emma's past?
That's a really lovely question. And it's one of those questions where I always find myself in a dilemma. Do I say, yeah, that was my turn?
Definitely.
I make myself sort of really considered and intelligent, or do I tell the truth, which is that it wasn't something that I even considered until I'd finished writing it either. I often hear writers talking about sort of how they wanted to work with a theme or a sort of, an idea. And I really admire them, but that's not how it works for me. I write a story and I layer it and layer it and layer it using my gut. And then at the end, I can sort of critically analyze it and think, oh, yes, there's a really strong theme of, agency and story here. Never my intention at the time.
I was reading On Writing by Stephen King recently. I don't know if either of you have read it. Both of you have.
Yeah, I love
and he
that.
talks of such a good book, but he talks about how his writing process is similar, Rosie. He says it's like there's a fossil and he has to unearth that fossil. And he has no idea, like plot would be like going at it with a jackhammer, but he has to go at it with, a toothbrush and pick it out. And then the story, he just follows the story. And in the end, he's like, oh, there's a theme or this works. And maybe I'll pull that out a little more.
Maybe I will read it. I've never done any creative writing courses or lectures or even read books. Various reasons. Just the idea of it terrifies me. And I've always wanted to read on writing, but been too afraid to, because I know myself and I know that I'll then become obsessed with beats and scenes and structural things.
Yeah, but his one's almost the antidote to that, because he doesn't because he doesn't outline. So he really is seated. He's going into a dark tunnel with just his lights on, and that's the extraordinary thing about that book. So it is definitely worth reading. Okay. Yeah, I know totally know what you mean about the ones with all the beats and at this point this is like, oh gosh. And you do have to follow your instinct, I think, when you're telling a story, and you kind of know it's a sort of rhythm, isn't it? You get to a point where it's like, okay, you need to change point of view or change tempo, and you have
do you have a method,
to trust them.
Do you have a method? Because your novels are so seamless. It's really well, but it's really what's interesting about people who've studied creative writing, people who haven't, is that the end result is always the same. Hopefully, if it's a good novel, it's going to be really compelling, and things will happen, and they'll get dramatic, and then they'll calm down again. And I'm really fascinated because if I read a novel, I can't tell if the person's done their beats and their midpoint twist or whatever.
Yeah.
So do you have a method?
I loosely sort of outline, as in I know the characters and I know the characters' backstory and I know how it's going to end, but I write quite instinctively, but I edit and rewrite a huge amount. And so I think a lot of the if it hopefully look at the end, if it looks seamless at all, it's because I've sort of chipped away with it, with a pickaxe rather than a gentle brush, actually. And I'm quite brutal with my red pen, and I just take out anything that doesn't add something or move it forward or enrich it in some way.
But
so
that's
I lose
editing.
Probably 30,000 words. Yeah.
You're talking about the editing piece. So like when you're writing, do you go back and edit, or do you allow yourself to just let it flow and see where it's going to go?
I edit as I go. So I edit the previous day's writing, and then I move, and that sort of helps me get into the groove for that day's writing. I find it quite hard just to start afresh every day, I think. And but I have tried. I aspire to be a real detailed outliner, because I think it must be not easier but quite reassuring having that, that skeleton by which you go, well, I don't know what to write now. Oh, but I know it is on the outline. I know. I think it's Sophie Hannah, who's a crime writer. She writes a sort of 40,000 word outline for her books, and then so it's almost that's the main bit of work, and then she will go and flesh it out. That's not how I write.
No,
there's no right way, though, is there? Do you think, Rosie? You kind of get there however you get there.
I don't think there's a right way, but I think there are wrong ways, and I think I definitely write in the wrong way. I don't just edit the day before's writing. I will keep going until it's perfect, and that's of course such a waste of time, because I wrote 4 books pseudonymously before I wrote The Love of My Life and Ghosted. And with those books, I have edited them fairly heavily, but that was that. Whereas with both of these, I've lost tens and tens of thousands of words, and that makes the process of editing while writing utterly pointless and painful. Particularly when I wrote The Love of My Life, my second one, I knew that I was going to end up trashing almost half of it. Didn't stop me.
But is that part of the process though? Like, to get to the right character or the right door, you have to open some doors that maybe that's the wrong door, but you still have to open them to get to the right door.
I mean, it might be, and actually what I've done for this next book that I'm going to start writing in September is to hire a writing coach, and not a creative writing coach, because as I said, that whole thing scares me. And I already have a sort of feedback process with my writing partner, but she's going to be a sort of getting my bum on the seat, helping me with my confidence, helping me carve out time because I've got 2 really young children, and helping stop me wasting months of my life editing work that will never see the light of day. So I sort of think with the, significantly enhanced accountability that I'm going to be subject to, I will hopefully manage to put some distance between me and this practice of editing pointlessly.
I think that with every book, one tries to do it slightly differently, don't you think? And that you kind of think, well, that didn't work last time, or I wasted loads of time doing this, and therefore I'm going to try this. But I don't know. I think you can keep learning, but I also think there's an element of you always sort of find a different route there, and it's still a route. And sometimes it just takes in a slightly different kind of view. But I really want to write a completely outlined novel, and that's on my list of ambitions.
Your bucket list.
When you're a grown-up.
Definitely. Yes, exactly.
When you're a grown-up, yeah. When I'm a real writer.
Yeah. Exactly that.
Tell me about your process, Eve. Do you wake up every morning? Are you very strict about where you write and when you write and how long you write? How does your day look like, a typical writing day?
Well, when I'm actually in a novel, so I wrote that quite close to it being published over here, and I wrote it over lockdown, and I found that writing over lockdown, in my shed with 3 teenagers sort of knocking around the house for half the needing homeschooling and all the issues that came with that. I found it a really intense period and difficult. It had a strain to it, that thankfully it doesn't really anymore. And so I kind of, when I filed that and it finally went, I did have to take a big sort of deep breath and kind of recharge and really think about what I wanted to write next, and watch loads of movies, and that's exactly what I've done. But I now know, what I'm going to do, and so it's that kind of jumping off point, that resistance to getting in the pool, the cold water of the pool. And once I'm in that, then I'm off, and I will. I know my characters, and I'll sit down after breakfast and I'll write until the kids come home, and then I'll break and I'll go for a run or go to a yoga class and take the dog out and do all the things that need to be done and put the laundry on. And I just try and make it work, because there's people around in the house all the time. I've got 4 teenagers here at the moment, so it's just but it's easy. 4 teenagers are actually easier than Rosie's situation with 2 younger ones, I think, because the teenagers actually don't really want me. I'm like, I'm out of my shed. They're like, oh.
And they're like, we don't care. That's a good point. Rosie, what about you? What does a writing day look like for you?
So I had this whole section of my previous website where I talked about how I wrote, and I had to remove the entire thing once I had children. It was all about having structure and boundaries, and time chunks of this and no distractions, and having some breathing space between starting your day and sitting down at your desk, and not trying to just run from one thing and arrive at your desk and just create. And I had to delete that entire section of my website because I didn't adhere to a single thing. I mean, it's stuff that I thought, and I never used to understand why most of my writing friends would go on retreats. It's like, you just need some more discipline. I had no idea. So, I mean, I can tell you what my method used to be, which involved the Pomodoro technique. And if anyone watching this now or in the future is curious to know that what that is, look it up. Spend a Pomodoro's worth of time, which is 25 minutes, just having a look through the website. There is an accompanying book which explains it in detail, and people can sort of describe it in quite a reductive way, which is, oh yeah, that's it, that thing where you work for 25 minutes and then you rest for 5 minutes and then you work for 25. I mean, that's what it looks like, but there's so much more to it than that. And I used to do that, and I would always go for a walk in the middle of it, and I would do no more than 8 Pomodoros, which means 4 hours work, in total for the day. And it was just brilliant. It was really freeing. I got loads done, and my life just doesn't look like that yet. My youngest has just turned 2, so in 2 and a bit years time she will be in school, and then I can answer your question effectively, because I suspect the next one's just going to be another mad, just, oh god, I've got 5 minutes, let's do some writing kind of
actually, that technique I have used that actually also. It is good, and not in so much detail as you, but certainly just in terms of putting on a 25-minute alarm on my phone, and I rise, and it's just a really good thing to stop you sort of wandering off down to research wormholes or checking your social media. I do think for me anyway, the Wi-Fi is the biggest problem, and I keep trying to block it, but then it's on my phone, and I think, well, I have to have my phone on in case somebody needs me. It's quite so yeah, it's and of course it's designed to be addictive, and it's very effective.
Well, it totally is. Yeah.
If my new coach is able to come up with any solutions for me, I shall pass them straight on. Eve started a WhatsApp group for a few author friends during lockdown called the Author Gin Bar, and we all checked in quite a bit, particularly in the first early lockdown, just about how utterly horrific it was trying to write books whilst we were stuck in our houses with children.
It was hard. Yeah.
I don't feel like I've recovered creatively.
No.
From that.
Will we ever either? Are things just different? We have to find a new path forward in a lot of ways. I want to take our listeners and our viewers into your book, Rosie. Can you tell us, what is the fossil for this book, the impetus for writing it, the kernel that came to you, and a little bit about it? Because we got a little bit about Eve's, but our readers don't know exactly what The Love of My Life is about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I gladly talk about Eve's book all night. It's just everything she writes. I'm just such a huge fan. It's such a beautiful book. I hadn't even thought about mine before coming on. So, well, I'll just quickly give a synopsis of the story. It's about a couple, Emma and Leo, who seem ostensibly to be really happy and successful. She's a well-regarded marine biologist. He writes obituaries for a broadsheet newspaper in London. They've got a lovely daughter, a funny dog called John Keats, and they live.
I love that.
They live in Hampstead Village. Everything seems to be going well, but actually, when we meet them, Emma's waiting to find out if her cancer treatment has worked, and Leo is dealing with his terror in the way that he knows best, which is to just start writing her obituary, because of course most obituaries are written before the person dies. And in the course of basic fact-checking, Leo discovers that Emma's not who she says she is. They've been married for years. They've been together for more than 10 years. So the novel sort of charts his descent into hell as he uncovers more and more about his wife and discovers that her name isn't even Emma. And that we do eventually find out, just to reassure anyone. And it's a pretty tragic tale. So where did this book come from? Oh, go on.
Yeah.
I was going to say, but it's so full of love and warmth as well, and just that portrait of a marriage and the tender moments within it are just really beautifully done, and it's really rare to see that on the page. That sort of mix of that sort of, I don't know, it's that they've got a young child, and yet they're obviously still in love. I can't be careful about what I say because I give away a spoiler, but it's beautifully done.
Thanks.
And where did it come from? Where did you get the idea?
Yeah, so it came out of a really awkward dinner party nearly 10 years ago.
That's awesome.
My partner and I had just moved to a new town, and we we went on a sort of friend date with another couple, and it just the conversation did not flow. There was no chemistry. But there was a brief moment of respite where the guy in this couple was telling us about a poet whose obituary he was writing. He was a poet himself, and he was writing an obituary of his sort of poet hero, I guess. And I was just absolutely fascinated because he was in contact with this man, and I just kept asking, like, does he know that you're writing it? Like, is he sort of putting on his best self when you talk? Like when you email, his emails sort of veering towards self-curation. This is so fascinating. So I made a note under the table in my phone, you know, obituary writer. And I then spent a very long time, I mean years, trying to work out what the story was. And in that time, my agent nearly sacked me. She was just so horrified by the ideas that I was coming up with, although they all involved somebody called John Keats, whether it's a dog or a human. So John was always there. He's part of the kernel. And yeah, I don't know how it came to me, but I just eventually had a sentence. Obituary writer starts researching his wife's life and discovers she's not who she says she is. And from that point, it's like Eve said, then I was off. But the process to get to that point was surprisingly painful. And I couldn't nail it. So that's part of why I came up with the idea for Ghosted, because I needed a book idea quite quickly. And so I wrote Ghosted whilst I was still trying to figure this one out.
Not a bad plan B, it turned out.
I mean, it was not a bad plan B.
Yeah.
Yeah, a life-changing plan B. Thank God for plan B. Thank God for my terrible plan A's.
Well, plan A ended up being a wonderful plan, and indeed, it's so beautiful. And you're so right, Eve. It's written with such tenderness and such love for these characters. I wondered, like, are these characters based on people in your life? Like, how did you write them with such tenderness? And it felt like empathy to me.
No, I never base characters on real people. For me, it's just a very long form process of layering. And I mean, for fiction writers, you know, we have to start with plot, really. We can't start with character. I mean, I'm very happy to be proved wrong, but you know, I've yet to meet anyone who starts with character. But with this one, I had an unusual experience in that Emma came to me fully formed very early on. So I knew her from the beginning. I knew what she looked like. I knew what she sounded like. I could have described her very clearly. Leo took longer. I mean, all of them took longer. They all do. And really, as I'm sure you both know, really, it's not until the final edit has left your desk that character is fully formed and ready to walk out of the pages and into the world.
That's very true, I think.
And I think, you know, the tenderness of their sort of love story was deliberate, because I don't want readers to just sort of give up on them as soon as they discover that there's something very rotten in the state of Denmark. You know, I don't want it to be oh God, oh no, oh they've deceived each other. Oh well, you know, I want it to be really difficult. You know, as for the reader, like, what do I do with this? They're so beautiful together, and yet. So that was deliberate, and that took a lot of editing and thinking and plotting and replotting, as these things always do.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes have to be high for that relationship, and they are, aren't they? And that's you want it. You want him to not find out to the things that he finds out. And yeah, I think I said to you when I first read it, it has all the feels, that book. It's like, takes you on a little emotional roller coaster.
Well, so does yours. And yet what I love about yours is that it takes us on an emotional roller coaster, and there, even in the darkest moments, you can still make me laugh.
I'm very happy to hear that.
What about you? Where did the idea come from for the Birdcage?
Well, actually, you know what, my idea is always, I find it really hard to unravel them after the event, because they all sort of knot together. But I did have the three. I did want to write about three. I wanted to write about three sisters who had different mothers. So I thought that was really interesting, because the idea, in a way, that siblings remember childhood differently anyway. So you can have a nuclear family, and you'll all remember the events slightly differently, or massively differently, I think. and actually having them with different mothers it just amplifies that. So of course they're coming to that relationship with love, but conflict and competition and rivalry and all these things. So I thought that was interesting, and I also thought it was interesting that if they remembered one event that happened, and this happens in 1999 in the lead up to a total solar eclipse, and if they remembered this key event differently, how, where was the truth? And so when I was writing the contemporary section, it's very much, as Rose says, it's about layering. It's about scraping back to the backstory in a way, and that's where the truth, you're always looking for the cracks in the story to let the truth come out, the light come in, and that's what I was doing through their 3 points of view. So it started with the sisters, and also I knew that I wanted to write about a painting, and so the idea that they would all be in the same painting and they'd be sitting for this painting in the past section, that became a real really pushed the plot. So I'd say sisters and art, but that makes it sound terribly vague. And then I threw in Cornwall as well, but it all sort of comes together slightly with me at the same time. Once I've got my setting and my characters, I kind of know what I can do with them.
One of the things about your book that I loved so much is each of the sisters is very insecure and compares herself against the others, whether it's looking for approval from the other sister or sisters, and if they're as successful, as beautiful, as put together, and they see each other as so perfect. If only I could have had her life, perhaps, then my life would be perfect. But really, they're all broken and flawed in their own way. And in the end, there's so much healing in understanding that they're not perfect.
Yeah. And I think that for me also was the idea of the birdcage, that they're all in their little cages, really, because they've built their own narratives over the years, partly as a sort of protection thing and partly out of insecurity and as a reaction to this traumatic event that happens in 1999. So, I suppose at the end they are free, aren't they? They're all out their cages and they're together, and that's the sort of story arc for the whole book. But they have to do quite a lot of work to get there, and quite a few things have to happen, thankfully.
Absolutely. And just beautiful. And in both books, the beauty of the characters, that's what drives you forward. The plots are great too, because you're not sure, there's a mystery to it. Something's happening, you don't know quite sure, and you want to know why, but it's the characters that bring you to that final page. In both.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think,
sorry.
Go on, Rosie. You go.
No, I actually just wanted to read a paragraph of the Birdcage, because I was thinking about it this afternoon, and I was thinking of what is it that I love most about Eve's books, and I couldn't really pin it down. I think it's got to be a combination of the characters, who are so vivid and so human and so funny and so fragile and beautiful, and Eve's way with words. And if I could just get into a bath with your language and just roll around in it, so happy. And this is, but no, I'm glad that came up, because I was hoping I might have an opportunity to read this, because this so brilliantly sums up the way that you just have these rich, busy, buzzing descriptions of people, and yet even with all these beautiful words you use, there's just so much humanity. So this is Flora. She's describing Angie, who is her father's girlfriend, and sort of a very complex and not immediately lovable character. The Campari red plume of hair, the triumphant smile on that slack, sensual mouth, the starburst of lines around those blown out mad green eyes, the surreal cruelty of Angie, now in the pneumatic badlands of her mid-40s, wearing Cuban-heeled ankle boots, silver, and a leopard print fake fur, sashaying into Rock Point, looking like she'd spent the intervening years at a sordid party. She even moves in her own pocket of warm, sweet, musky air, that smell when you strip clean bed linen after sex. That to me just tells me everything I need to know about Eve's extraordinary use of language and choice of words, and her ability to just nail a character without them even needing to say anything.
Yeah, Yeah, I love
No,
that
I can't
scene.
say anything. That's so wonderful. Well, let me get all emotional. I'd forgotten I'd written that about Angie. Yeah, no, she's a lively character. She is.
They all are. No, but nobody does mad English people quite like you.
I want to ask you both about perspective. So in the Birdcage, it's third person. We have the perspective of the three sisters from the present in third person. But then when we go back to 1999, Lauren's perspective is first person.
Yeah.
How did this come to be?
I thought I'd made my life really difficult, basically. No, I didn't deliberately. I wrote it like that because it felt right, actually. And initially the past section was third person, and I just couldn't get the immediacy of the child. And because I really wanted to distinguish her age, I just felt that actually, I just love a child. I'm always really drawn to a child's perspective and the way they see the world. And there's a sort of clarity to it and a sort of absurdness to it in a way, and a simplicity, all those things. And so I kind of, that's why I did it in first person. And the sisters had to be equal in a way, so they had to have the similar voices. But yeah, it was, I did sometimes kind of think, why am I making this really, 3 points of view, then another point of view in the past? It felt like a kind of a puzzle that I had to put together. And to keep in voice, and I constantly I would read it aloud sometimes just to make sure that the dialogue wasn't slipping from one character to the next.
That's hard. It's well done.
Yeah, thank you. I did a lot of editing on the dialogue, and the thoughts of the sisters. So they all have their own imagery as well. So they hopefully the language you're able to distinguish between them, so that you're inside your head and each head.
I'm always fascinated when I read a book that has the different perspectives. And in this case, three sisters who, are relatively close in age, how do we make them sound different and give their own personalities? And you did that so well.
Thank you.
Rosie, what about you?
Without having to resort to stereotype as well. Because when you're
exactly
three distinct personalities, you could easily just go, oh, the lunatic, the posh, whatever. And actually,
exactly,
they're all they're three really distinct and very complex, tricky characters. You haven't resorted to any sort of characterization commonplaces. It's very well handled. So if it was a struggle, it doesn't show. There's no nail marks. There's no nail marks.
No, falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of a final published book. We don't get to see all the pain. It looks seamless. Like, oh, this must have been so easy to write. It's so perfect. I can't imagine you had trouble.
But there's always those lines though that I don't know if you remember them, Rosie, when you bang down in your first draft, and it's so satisfying seeing them there in the last, and you think, oh, I actually remember writing that, and I loved it at the time, and it got through all my red pens and all the edits and everything else. And sometimes you just write something, don't you, and it's still there, or it captures the and I think for me, it was that moment when one of the daughters, when the boomer father says, I've decided, girls, I'm going to live the rest of my life exactly as I please, and they all just turn him sort of staggered and say, who were you trying to please before? And that for me was that moment when it was just the sort of generational clash, and that sets them off basically in that section. What about you, Rose? Do you remember stuff that you wrote in your first draft, Rosie? Do you have clear memories of writing particular lines?
Yeah, I do, and it'd be really interesting to work out one day, like what percentage of your first draft makes it to your final draft. And it's always a tricky one, because with that sort of thing, because when you write, and it's normally imagery for me, when you write something that you're like, wow, that's just spot on, it's beautiful, and then you're ready to refuse to let it go, and you kind of stet it the first time, then stet it the second time. That which is for people who aren't familiar with the word, it means basically keep it, leave it as is, please.
Keep it, yeah.
And then the third time round, they're still attacking it. You end up writing a note in the margin saying, no, I want to keep it, this makes sense. And then they'll come back again saying, no, it still doesn't work. So with a couple of those, actually, I've just gone, oh God, do you know what? I'll have it. I'm going to keep it in my American edition or my British edition, depending on which editor is objecting to it. Those are the ones when it's like you're the sort of Rolls Royce of your imagery for that novel. It's the one that your editor hates most. Oh God, no.
I wanted to ask you both, because I forget who, but one of you, the same editor, you have the same editor for the American version and the British version, is that right? Or did you have two editors? Okay, so talk to me about that process. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So I have an editor in London and an editor in New York, and they're both within Penguin Random House.
How different was the process, cutting, and how does that work? So you create the British version and then you edit it again for the American version?
Well, I think it varies. It varies for different authors. Certainly for me, I mean, I'm really lucky that I work with both my editors at the same time, and they're really happy working together, and they bring different things to the table, and they're brilliant actually.
Awesome.
And I have to say, when I cling on to my certain words, and I like Rosie, I hold out, and then I just like, oh God, they're right. And then, they're pretty much always right. So I'm really, I do have them both coming in at the same time, which really is helpful. What about you, Rosie?
It's been slightly different just in terms of when the deals have been struck for my books. So like with this one, The Love of My Life, my two editors did do a lot of stuff at the same time, but I just think it's a really difficult thing because they're not the same person, and they're both distinct editors with their own distinct ideas and styles and beliefs and experience. So no, I hugely appreciate their collaboration, and they've worked together on many, on so many different aspects of the production and sort of editorial development of this novel, but they are still two people, and you will still get times when the manuscript has a note from one saying, this is beautiful, and the other one saying, this makes no sense. What do I do? I've decided after polling, I think actually some of the writers in our Authors Gin Bar WhatsApp group, I decided to just do my own thing if that happened, and just listen to my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like Eve says, they are almost always right. And my writing partner sometimes says, I can't bear how much you just agree to do and just sort of almost like roll over and acquiesce to. But I just think, these women between them have published hundreds of novels.
Yeah,
I've written 6.
Yeah.
I think it's always worth turning off track changes after I grudgingly, sometimes furiously, made that change. Turning off the markup and then just reading it, and it's undeniable. But funnily enough, when you turn the markup back on and you can see what you've lost, it's like no, I need to leave it as was. Turn it off again, it's like, oh God, no, it's gone. I don't need it. They were right again.
That's awesome.
It's annoying, but it is awesome.
Well, and it does result in a better book, because we are outstanding so close. Yeah, you're so close to your story. It means something different to you than it will to the reader. And ultimately, the reader adds to the story too. We take it and we envision it in a different way than you do. You have to let it out into the world and let it become what it's going to become in everyone's individual collective brains, right?
Yeah.
I know Julie's going to join us, so we're just about out of time, and I'm really sad because I think both of you are just amazing, brilliant, lovely. I loved both of these books, and I'm so honored that I got to talk to you both.
Oh,
love them.
Thank you for hosting us.
I just want to ask one question. I learned about something that I'd never heard of and had to figure out. Tell us a little bit about wellies. Both of you are like, wait, what? Wellies in the book. Yeah, both of you talk about wellies, the boots, the snow boots or the rain boots or the muck boots.
What do you call them?
The boots.
What do you call rubber? What do you call rubber boots?
Muck boots. I grew up calling them muck boots, and I'm like, what the hell is a welly? But the funny thing is, both of you, the wellies appear in both stories quite a bit, which obviously is very British.
And it's the weather. You can't go to Cornwall that way. Doesn't matter if you go in the summer or in the middle of the winter. I mean, you might chance it with a pair of hiking boots in the summer, but if you want to, if you're outside all the time,
they were very important.
Wellies do feature, although not in the last couple of days during the heat wave. It's like I can't imagine ever wearing wellies again.
No, I can't imagine wearing clothes again. I mean, I've pretty much got dressed for this event. I think when the wellies make their first appearance in my novel in Cornwall too, an early scene is in Cornwall. I think that's the first sighting of a wellie that we see.
That's right. That's right. And I loved that.
Wellies are a character in the book now.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a dog called Welly next.
Ooh, I like that.
Great conversation, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank
Real quick, and Eve, thank you, and Rosie, thank you too. We're not quite ready to, because I have some questions. You guys were cracking me up though about Eve, especially when you talked about the house being the same as the grandmothers, and when my children are 31 and 29, and they come home and they go, this place is like a museum, it hasn't changed since we were kids, and I'm like, oh my god, am I at that?
Well, but the thing is, it's all of us. I was thinking exactly that the other night. I was thinking I have all my little things that I collect. I really like collecting sort of odd eccentric little things, and I think my children are just going to, when I die, I'd be like, darlings, it's all for you. They're going to look at it and think, oh God.
No. My kids have flat out told me, we don't want any of this. I mean, they have been like that brutal. They're just like, we don't want any of it.
That's unkind.
They'll change their minds. I guarantee they'll change their minds.
I don't know. It's like, oh my God, the attic. I don't know. Anyways. And I also, because I'm in the background listening the whole time, and I so want to like pop in and like throw my comments in too, because when you talked about how the siblings see things so differently, the same event, and it's that is, I just think, a universe. It's so true, and it rings so true in this book and in life and in everything. It's just like same event, three different complete different interpretations of what's happening. Yeah. So it's so crazy. Eve, I loved this book. I thought it was so. Did you know? It can't be a spoiler because I know. But did you know with The Secret from the very beginning, The Secret? Yeah. Okay.
I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a good question.
Yeah. Because it was just one of those things, and when everybody's got to read it to know what the secret is. And I
knew what the secret was, but I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to reveal it. So actually, it took me to the end of the book to really know exactly the way it should be revealed.
Okay.
Which won't mean anything to anyone who doesn't read the book. Anyway.
But I love that though. But then they can come back and they go, now we know what she was talking about.
I don't know if you agree, Rosie, but so much writing fiction is about how you reveal things, isn't it? It's what you hold back all the time. How do you reveal the secret? And so you're constantly playing this game of omitting information and letting little bits through, and
it can't come completely out of the blue though. It has to have a thread somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, you drop all these breadcrumbs, but then you have to spend all of your time measuring the size of your breadcrumb. Like,
yes, exactly.
Is that too big? Do I need to make it a bit smaller? But is it big enough that it's measuring breadcrumbs is another thing we spend a lot of time doing.
Mm-hmm. So great though. Well, again, Eve, congratulations. The book just released yesterday, The Birdcage. And both of your books, and Rosie, like Jennifer said, the covers, spot on covers both. And I'm a cover. It's just like, I'm sorry, a book is judged by its cover, and it's you're walking, it's the discovery thing. People are walking through a bookstore and it's got to grab you. So they both did a great job on these. Thank you, ladies. Congratulations on everything. Hopefully one of these years, when we're out of this pandemic, you both will make it to Southern California, and we will see you in person, hopefully. If not,
we'd love that.
We'll do this again.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.